All right, folks, let us talk about the Scorpio full moon, which is on Monday, and I am, of course, recording this on Thursday. What happens when a full moon occurs? Let's just break that down a little bit. And I'm not being patronizing when I say that. Just, I think with this particular full moon, it becomes important to consider. And I'll explain, and it'll become clear why I mean that. The sun typically enters a house in your chart. In this case, currently, the house occupied by the sign of Taurus in your chart. I use the whole sign house system, WHOLE. So the sign that is rising on the eastern horizon at the time of your birth, that entire sign goes into your first house, the next sign into the second, the third, the fourth, and so on. So if you are a Virgo rising, the sign of Taurus is going to be in your ninth house. For example, if you're a Scorpio rising, it will be in your seventh house. If you're a Capricorn rising, it will be in your fifth house. The sun enters a house in your chart around the 21st, 22nd of every month. Except in February, it's a little bit earlier, February 18th, 19th. And whenever the sun is going through a certain part of the chart, Mercury and Venus are close by. As you guys know, sometimes Mars is close by. And those planets, when they are, certainly the sun, Mercury, and Venus, whenever they go through a certain part of the chart, which they do roughly at around the same time every year, kind of perform an annual review of that house in the chart. And take action, communicate, plant seeds, try to bring that part of the chart into alignment. Now, there are other things going on with the longer term transits, where Jupiter is, where Saturn is, where Pluto is, where Uranus is, where Neptune is. But the sun is going through a certain part of the chart, the house in your chart, and the moon at some point is going to be opposite the sun. When the moon is opposite the sun, the entire disk, the side facing us, is illuminated. We have a full moon. But from an astrological perspective, the opposite house to the sun gets involved in the conversation. And this becomes an important principle to understand with the full moon. When the sun is going through a certain part of the chart, at some point the moon is going to meet up with the sun, creating a new moon. Sometimes we have the full moon in the opposite part of the chart first and the new moon later. Currently, we are having the new moon first. We have the new moon in Taurus on April the 27th. And 2 weeks later, we have a full moon, a corresponding full moon, this time in the sign of Scorpio, the house opposite the house occupied by Taurus, on the 12th of May. While the sun, Mercury, Venus are going through a certain part of the chart, and the focus is so intently on the part of the chart where they are transiting, currently the house occupied by the sign of Taurus. At some point in the process, as we're spending more and more time and energy, and as the moon is getting bigger, referring to our energy and our intuition and our emotional responses and decision making, and we're becoming that much more, things are getting that much busier and that much more unwieldy, etc., etc., etc. We're getting to a point where such a lot of focus on one part of the chart demands that the opposite part of the chart brings itself into the conversation. Why is this important? Opposing houses together are like the yin and yang in a circle. What is in one house is not in the other house. And there's a thematic relationship. The first house stands for me. The seventh house stands for the people that I am in committed agreements and relationships with. The second house stands for my emotional and financial independence. The eighth house opposite it stands for emotional and financial codependency. The third house stands for my mind and my communication and my dealing with mundane, worldly communication, transactions, feedback, conversation, processing, learning, skill acquisition. The ninth house is my connection not with the worldly, but with the spiritual, the higher mind. The fourth house is my private life. The most private is home, land, real estate. The 10th house is public life, career, fame, notoriety, public standing. The 5th house is my gifts, what sits in my heart, what I want to do, what brings me joy, what brings me pleasure. The 11th house is a focus on community, friends, networks, groups I belong to, humanity at large. The 6th house is the busiest part of the chart and how I engage with time to organize my schedule and execute on my responsibilities to others and myself. So job and health come into the 6th house. The 12th house is the least busy part of the chart, where I am releasing a last cycle, relatively inactive, in a timeout, isolated from others, and in a more reflective mode where spirit is communicating with me. So if Taurus is in your 7th house, for example, and you are Scorpio rising, and you are currently evaluating, reviewing your partnerships and the relationships that are important in your life, where they are financial and emotional ties and codependencies, and you're bringing that part of the chart into alignment, at some point during that process, you're going to have a full moon in your 1st house, where your self is going to assert itself to help rectify, balance things out. Very often, a full moon in the 1st house can stand for a tantrum or boundary setting. The full moon is in the house that stands for me. I get to the pot, my emotional pot of milk comes to a boil and spills over. Sometimes a full moon in the 1st house can mean a certain type of visibility amongst people we are contracted to, if it's a job or a client, or but other times when we're evaluating relationships and contracts and who we find ourselves contracted to, let's say that rather that we are evaluating or thinking about our marriage, or if we are living with family members, or if indeed we find ourselves in a job or a contract, and let's say something about it as we evaluate things is not right or needs to be addressed, and we aren't quite finding the way to do that. When the full moon happens in the 1st house, we express ourselves. But that expression, that full moon, is very much part of the conversation that has to do with reviewing, managing, bringing the Taurus part of the chart currently, the house that is being transited by the Sun and Mercury and Venus, into alignment. But you cannot astrologically ever consider a house without considering its opposite, because they're totally related. They're like two sides of the same coin. It's like a seesaw, where when emphasis is put on one side of the seesaw, the full moon shows up at some point during that emphasis on one side of the seesaw to balance things out on the other side. Sometimes when you have the new moon occurring and the Sun and Mercury going over the 5th house, very often, and you have a full moon in the 11th house, very often some result of the things that you love to do, your creativity, whatever it is that you love to do, can become publicly visible to a group of friends on social media. So something that you're working on that is personal, that is a little bit more isolated in the 5th house, that is concerned with what you love to do, maybe there's a posting about it, or people realize that you are in a play or having an exhibition, or and for the 72 hours around the full moon, you become visible to your friends and your network and the larger community, and you are the recipient of some kind of applause as a result of it. This Scorpio full moon, I hasten to say, is a full moon and not an eclipse. But part of the reason why I hasten to say it is because some of the astrological placements around it are quite, well, they're eclipsy for the simple reason that the Scorpio full moon trines the North Node in Pisces. So let's talk about the astrology of the Scorpio full moon. This backdrop is going to drive me crazy. Try not to, at some point I'll end up closing that window. It is a warm day in Los Angeles after very cloudy days and kind of cold days even, so the windows are open. The sun is in Taurus. At the time of the full moon, Mercury enters Taurus, but is at about, I have the chart here, about 3 or 4 degrees of Taurus at the time of the full moon. I am going to close this. So we have the sun in Taurus. Let's just see. We've got Mercury at about 4 degrees of Taurus. We've got the sun at 22 degrees of Taurus, and we have Uranus at 26 degrees of Taurus. So the sun and Uranus are conjunct. Opposite the sun at 22 degrees of Scorpio, we have the full moon, which is opposite Uranus. The full moon is also trining the North Node, which is at 24 degrees of Pisces. And the sun is trining the South Node in Virgo, something we talked about in the last weekly overview that I did. So, Sun and Taurus, Sun and Uranus together in Taurus, trining the South Node in Virgo. Moon, full moon in Scorpio, opposite Uranus, and trining the North Node in Pisces. The full moon is also loosely trining Saturn by about 6 or 7 degrees, but I tend not to if an aspect isn't within 5 degrees, I tend not to factor it in. Otherwise, things become a little complicated. The two things that we need to talk about are Uranus and Taurus and the North Node in Pisces and the South Node in Virgo. And I'm calling the nodes one axis because that's what the full moon is aspecting. As I've mentioned to you before, Uranus is committed to and concerned with our integrity with ourselves and the things that are right for us. And very often, Uranian paths, opportunities, can come into conflict with a conventional way of doing things, which is why the planet Uranus is often linked with unconventionality. But the unconventionality is not unconventionality for its own sake, rebellion for its own sake. It is very much tied with who we authentically are. And who I authentically am may be very, very different from who you authentically are and what works for you. Somewhere in the middle of all of this, God, that siren, sorry. Somewhere in the middle of all this, when it comes to us being in integrity with ourselves, I have to call attention to the strategies that are right for us based on the North Node placement in our birth chart. If the North Node is in Sagittarius or the 9th house, you may need to rely more and more on invisible guidance and intuition to make your decisions. If the North Node is in Gemini or the 3rd house, you may really need to vet out the facts and the details and look to tangible feedback and tangible data as a way of making decisions. So the same strategy does not apply to everybody. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm actually really enjoying doing this, and for whatever reason, that siren is really intrusive. And it's funny, I'm so aware of all these ambient noises in a way that I'm just like, do they only happen when I'm doing videos? Because they don't seem to bother me at any other time. With Uranus, it's sort of the classic placement of doing the things we're told we should be doing in order to get from A to Z, and how someone figures out, actually doesn't even figure out, someone is marching to the beat of their drums so closely and so in touch with the strategy that is right for them, so in touch with their being in integrity with themselves, that they are able to make decisions. With Uranus, it's not about seeing the end game as much as it is about identifying the right next step. Now my cat is snoring. I'm just going to take all of this as applause for what we're talking about here. I'll be delusional. Sometimes, for example, I live in Los Angeles. When people are following artistic careers, there's a lot of, you should first do this, and you should do this, and then you should do this, and you should prepare your audition piece, and then you get your BFA, then you should get your MFA, then you should find that this is the way things need to be. And yet, every now and then we'll hear of this. It's so interesting. I'm getting a particular example in my mind. So often we'll hear of someone who decides that there's an open call for a national tour of something they think they're right for, and they don't let the do I have this, do I not have this get in the way of the fact that they go for it. Now, typically in these kinds of situations, you have to be in a certain place and you have to be able to deliver. But rather than going through a certain process based on the experience they've had or whatever they determine, they feel they're right for this, they're ready to go for it, they show up, they stand in line, they sign up at 3 a.m., I don't know, I'm making all of this up or whatever it is, and they get seen at the open call and they get cast. And someone who's been following and doing the conventional thing does not. It's not always necessarily, what is going on in Glendale? Seriously, it's Glendale. Why do we need a siren? Might be a fire thing. I can hear a fire engine. Sorry. Very often it's not necessarily about taking huge risks, although taking leaps of faith. But I want to remind you that leaps of faith does not always mean relying totally on intuition. As I said, if you have the North Node in Gemini, the third house, the intuition is already there. It's important for people with the North Node in the third house or Gemini to be able to look at the facts and data and allow that to guide them, as opposed to be taking leaps of faith. Very often with Uranus, terms such as quantum leap and sudden dramatic things, earthquakes or lightning strikes, or, you know, like the Tower card. Oh my God, this happened so suddenly. And you're going to hear about this full moon. Sudden things might happen. I find with Uranus, it's not so much about suddenness as much as it is about this, I will call it an aha moment. For some astrologers, Uranus is the higher version of Mercury, so that Mercury is trying to make sense of things. I find Uranus very closely linked to intuition. It's those moments where you're trying to figure something out and trying to figure something out, trying to puzzle it, and you write about it, and you write in your diary, or you go talk to someone, and you can't get the answer. And there you are vacuuming or doing the dishes or cleaning the kitchen or cleaning the bathroom. And while you're occupied by something else, boom, something just rises up to the top and pops like a bubble. And you're just like, oh, I got it. If anything, it's a quantum leap of understanding. I find people who have Uranus in the first house to be sometimes very intuitive, or if Uranus is transiting someone's first house, or especially transiting someone's ninth house, they are extremely inclined to act in ways that they feel are totally right with them. They have no patience for anything or anybody who they feel is taking them off course, off the course that is right for them. Sometimes with Uranus, choices occur so that you're faced with two things. One that looks conventionally right, one that feels right in the room. And no one can blame anyone for taking something that looks conventionally right, but very often there are lessons around that. I'm making this up completely. Someone could be looking for an agent or a manager, and they could go meet with someone who does not have a very high profile or a very big profile, but they really liked them and the conversation was really solid and it felt good in the room. And then they met, let's say they met someone at one of the big agencies in Los Angeles, and they walked into the building and, they were looking at the marble walls and the polished desks, and of course, who wouldn't want to sign with one of the big agencies in Los Angeles, etc.? And maybe that's the decision they do. But they might find soon that their intuition was telling them that there were certain missing pieces. Something may have been missed or something may not have been clear or whatever it is. It's never with Uranus about the immediacy of the decision as much as it is of you understanding that you may not know. It is for you to find the right next step, the right next breadcrumb. And that's all you need to do, as long as it is in alignment with you and the strategy that is right for you. Because in that example, someone could sign with a huge agency, but if someone is just starting out, the agency may not be that interested in them, and they may find that they're barely getting any auditions, barely getting sent out, even though they have this big fancy name on their resume. Whereas had they gone with the people who were right for them, who were hungrier, they might have been going out a lot more. They might have found the right commercial that gave them their break. They might have found... You never know who you're going to meet and what partnerships you're going to find and what are the right breadcrumbs for you. And that's very Uranian. And it comes from a place of being in integrity with yourself and the strategies that are right for you and the path that is right for you. I would say with Uranus, less so with the North Node. Always be careful when things become so exciting in terms of being on point or purpose. Make sure if you're going to follow what is in alignment with you, that you're doing it in a grounded manner. Because sometimes, especially the North Node, but sometimes Uranus too can give the impression that I'm in alignment with myself and this magic carpet will just keep flying. And we can forget to tether our camel or our goat, and then all of a sudden it's just like, oh, now what I'm going to do? There's a way to move down the right path in a financially grounded manner. So, Uranus has been in Taurus since 2018, encouraging you, asking you to, not just encouraging and asking you, practically forcing you to consider the path that is right for you. Who are you meant to be? Who should you be? Who are you here to be in the Taurus part of the chart? What is the path that is right for you? What are the connections that are right for you? What are the right next steps? And they may not be the conventional next steps. And Uranus is getting ready to move into Gemini. So we have perhaps the final, or I would imagine the final, I haven't checked this for a fact, the final or the penultimate conjunctions with the Sun and Mercury and Venus in Taurus in 2025. These conjunctions have been happening pretty much every year since 2018. So these conjunctions in and of themselves are not earth-shattering. If anything, this time around, like always, Uranus will have a conversation and download something to the Sun, or you may already be, not quite, in a couple of days the Sun will be within 5 degrees of Uranus, and you may already be in this place, because it doesn't have to be within 5 degrees. In the Taurus part of your chart, the house occupied by Taurus, what is the right next step for me? What is the right path? What are the opportunities I should be pursuing? And as I said, with Uranus, sometimes the opportunity, what knocks at your door, can come disguised as not looking the way it should, but feeling right. Taking a chance on what feels right. Something happens that points you in a direction that feels right. One of the words that is used with Uranus is liberation. Liberates you from anything that compromises your integrity with yourself. So the Sun is getting ready to conjunct Uranus, and will conjunct Uranus a few days after the full moon. But at the time of the full moon, in the astrology of the full moon, the Sun is conjunct Uranus. Mercury will conjunct Uranus, and then Venus will conjunct Uranus soon enough in Taurus. I'm reaching for dates because I tend to, the kind of South Node part of me, the Gemini South Node in me, gets a very antsy if I don't give details. But if I were to stick with my North Node, I would let the details, those kinds of details, go. But I can't. No, I need to tell you when these conjunctions actually are happening. I mean, we can all Google these conjunctions, right? The Sun trines the South Node. The full moon is on the 12th. The Sun trines the South Node on the 14th. God help us. The sirens. And the Sun conjuncts Uranus on the 17th. So all of this happens next week. Monday is the full moon, and as the week progresses, the trine to the South Node becomes exact 2 days after, and on the 17th, the Sun conjuncts Uranus. And when it is a slower moving planet, it downloads to the Sun, it downloads to Mercury, it downloads to Venus. Mercury conjuncts Uranus on the 24th of May. And Venus is going to conjunct Uranus closer to the end of June. So, as I've been saying to you in the Taurus part of the chart, the Sun comes into Taurus. The new moon occurs on April the 27th, opening up a 4-week window of trying to bring the Taurus part of the chart into alignment. Mercury comes into Taurus on May the 10th. On May the 21st, the Sun leaves for Gemini. On the 26th, the Taurus month ends. And on that day, Mercury enters Gemini. But at the end of the first week of June, rather on June the 6th, Venus enters Taurus to try and bring some resolution to all this activity. But the nature of all this activity is very much seed planting, trying to bring the Taurus part of the chart into alignment. And based on everything we've said, bringing the Taurus part of the chart into alignment in the direction that is right for you. Now, on the 12th, the moon becomes full in the Scorpio part of the chart, and it brings up the questions in the following ways. What is going on? What needs to happen in the house opposite the Taurus part of the chart, in the Scorpio part of the chart, to help you move towards alignment, the right alignment in the Taurus part of the chart? More specifically, one can ask the question, does anything happen in the Scorpio part of the chart as a result of this full moon? You get a letter. Does something happen to prompt a change? And I would not typically use that word change with a full moon, but I will when it's opposite Uranus. What needs to happen in the Scorpio part of the chart, either to balance out the energies in your chart? If you're spending so much time and energy bringing the Taurus part of the chart into alignment, emotionally and intuitively and energetically, I'm talking about the moon, what comes up around the 12th? And we're talking 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, especially, of May. 48 hours before the full moon, 24 hours after the full moon. Seriously, what is going on, right? It's like I'm in South Central all of a sudden. Maybe this is a sign that whatever's coming up with this full moon, sirens should be going off. But the full moon does have that kind of astrological chart. What happens at around the time of this full moon that gives you a sense of dependency? As I said, what happens or what needs to happen in the Scorpio part of the chart to allow you to continue to move forward in the direction that is right for you in the Taurus part of the chart? The Sun trining the South Node and Mercury trining the South Node and Venus trining the South Node. The Sun, Mercury, and Venus in Taurus and the South Node in Virgo, we've discussed before a few times, and that's straightforward. What needs to be released in the Virgo part of the chart that allows you to, again, move in the direction that is right for you in the Taurus part of the chart? It's all about moving in the direction that is right for you in the Taurus part of the chart. Everything that is happening. Something needs to be released in the Virgo part of the chart. Something needed to be released in the Virgo part of the chart as you came upon the first lunar eclipse in Virgo on March the 13th of this year. So the week before and after January 13th, the week before and after March the 13th could give you a powerful sign and signal of what needed to be released. Now, as we head into next week, and then 2 or 3 weeks from now, as we head into Mercury trining the South Node, and then when Venus goes, we might continue to get strong signals of what it is that needs to be released. What are we outgrowing in the Virgo part of the chart? So that we can leave that behind and move more and more in the right direction for us in the Taurus part of the chart. With the full moon in Scorpio, there's a more powerful and intriguing link. What is the relationship between what comes up in the Scorpio part of our chart at the time of this full moon that is so closely tied to how and why we need to lean into the Pisces part of the chart? Is there some sort of a change or adjustment that needs to be made in the Scorpio part of the chart where the full moon is occurring, where making that change also contributes to stabilizing the Pisces part of the chart? There's something about this full moon that has an element of rightness. by doing this, by considering this, by making this change, by moving in this direction, by this occurrence happening in the Scorpio part of the chart, or you having an aha, or you making a decision, or somehow the universe moves you forward, or something happens in the Scorpio part of the chart that you go, I've got to make this change in the Scorpio part of the chart. I've got to either express this or make this change or address something. And there's a rightness to it. There's a rightness to it because it helps you to lean into something in the Pisces part of the chart, to get something out of the Pisces part of the chart, to help stabilize the Pisces part of the chart, while also facilitating and allowing you to move in the direction that is right for you in the Taurus part of the chart. It's that simple. And because the full moon is opposite Uranus, I'm not going to hesitate to use the word change. Some sort of change in the Taurus part of the chart that helps, that is in alignment with the North Node eclipses in Pisces, releasing something in the South Node eclipses in Virgo, in concord with those eclipses in Virgo, so that you can move in the right direction. And remember that Mercury is not conjunct Uranus yet, so we're not in the realm of communication and agreements. We're not yet in the realm of Venus conjuncting Uranus until the end of June, where something could actually occur in such a way that there's an opportunity that manifests. Although with the Sun, it could be that something happens as this week continues to progress into the weekend and into early next week. It could be that something comes up in such a way that prompts a change that puts you in touch with the right direction for you in the Taurus part of the chart. Now, the full moon is in the Scorpio part of the chart, so something could erupt there. Who sits in the house occupied by Scorpio in your chart? They might be the person who is having some sort of a reaction, a meltdown, want to be considered, want to be factored into the equation. The Scorpio part of the chart is asking to be recognized and balanced as you consider bringing the Taurus part of the chart into alignment. The rulers of this full moon are, because it's in Scorpio, Mars and Pluto. Mars is in Leo. Leo is ruled by the Sun. The Sun is in Taurus. Taurus is ruled by Venus. Venus is in Aries. Aries is ruled by Mars. So there's a one dispositorship between Mars and Leo, Sun in Taurus, and Venus in Aries. The dispositorships are way too diverse for this particular full moon. The full moon in and of itself tells enough of a story. But for those of you who are interested in stuff like that, with Pluto, Pluto's in Aquarius. Aquarius is ruled by Saturn and Uranus. Uranus is in Taurus, ruled by Venus. In Aries, ruled by Mars. And so we're back to that Mars-Sun-Venus dispositorship when you factor Uranus into the case. The interesting thing is that both these planets, the Sun and Uranus, which are such an important factor into this full moon, become important when we enter that sort of who is controlling the chart. And I'm intrigued by Mars in Leo and Venus entering the conversation. I'll tell you why in a second. With Saturn, Saturn is Pisces, ruled by Jupiter, Jupiter in Gemini, Mercury in Taurus, Taurus ruled by Venus. So we're back again to that Venus, Mars, Sun kind of arena, but also Pisces is ruled by Neptune. Neptune is Aries back to. It's interesting, Venus, Mars, and the Sun. Sun is in a house ruled by Venus. Venus is in a house ruled by Mars. Mars is a house ruled by the Sun. Somewhere the Sun in Taurus, Venus in Aries, Mars in Leo are exercising control over what's going on right now. And that's great. It's great because one of the 5 aspects that are encoded into this full moon are Venus trining Mars. Venus in Aries getting ready to trine Mars. And that trine occurs on May the 22nd. And to me, that particular aspect provides closure from all the retrogrades, Venus, Mars, and Mercury, that occurred. And it's lovely. Venus in Aries, where the North Node eclipses are currently exercising their influence till the end of the first week of June. Venus trying to bring some sort of closure and fruition in that part of the chart, the North Node in Aries part of the chart. The Aries part of the chart, where the North Node eclipse happened on March the 29th, and as I said, till the end of the first week of June, exercising its influence. Mars in Leo, allowing us, now that he is direct and moving forward, to pursue goal and set boundaries from the Leo part of the chart, and the Sun in Taurus. All of this somehow in conversation with bringing the Taurus part of the chart into alignment. The second aspect we've already discussed that is encoded into this full moon is the Sun trining the South Node. The more you consider bringing the Taurus part of the chart into alignment, the more you have to take into account what needs to be released in the Virgo part of the chart to allow for that alignment to occur and to grow. Now, this is interesting because Pluto is one of the rulers of this full moon. The aspect that is closest, tightest at the time of this full moon is Mercury in Taurus squaring Pluto in Aquarius. Some sort of communication, cognition, drafting, communicating, thinking, articulating, processing related to bringing the Taurus part of the chart into alignment becomes necessary, intriguingly, to allow you to help Pluto make his transformation in the Aquarius part of the chart. Now, this is a long-term. Mercury will be squaring Pluto from Taurus a lot over the next 18, 19 years. But again, it puts the onus on the faster-moving planet Mercury to do something over the next 4 or 5 days to help Pluto. You could be in a place where finally, after the 10th, when Mercury enters Taurus, you're in a place of getting communications out, being in communication in the Taurus part of the chart. The Sun has been here since the 21st, 22nd of April. The new moon happened on the 27th. Till May the 26th, it's still the month of Taurus. And Mercury comes in on the 10th, and communications related to the Taurus part of the chart, and using communications to help bring the Taurus part of the chart into alignment with what you value and where you want to go and what you want the house occupied by Taurus in your chart to look like. Communications start to ratchet up. And those communications become very important as a contributing factor for Pluto to help loosen ties in the Aquarius part of the chart so that the right transformations can occur. The fourth aspect we've talked about a lot is Jupiter squaring the nodes. See, it's interesting when it comes to all these aspects that are being made. All the planets we were considering in the dispositorships, Venus, Mars, the Sun, Jupiter, Pluto, have all entered the conversation. Mercury. Jupiter, since May 25th of 2024 till the end of the first week of June of this year, is ending a 12-13-year cycle, starting a 12-13-year cycle in the Gemini part of the chart, the house occupied by Gemini, and linking that ending and new beginning to whatever direction you set for yourself when Jupiter last transited your 9th house. And Jupiter has to move towards making these endings and new beginnings in such a way that it actually allows the nodes and the eclipses to perform their function, for you to be able to lean into, for some reason, the Pisces part of the chart and release something in the Virgo part of the chart. And that leaning into and releasing is very connected to this full moon in Scorpio and moving in the right direction in the Taurus part of the chart. Finally, the fifth aspect, which is very, very intriguing and does not become exact until February, March of 2026, is Saturn is getting closer and closer to Neptune. Saturn is still in Pisces. It's trying to stabilize the Pisces part of the chart till May the 20th. I'll talk about this more when we do next week's weekly overview. Saturn is still in Pisces, and the conjunction will become exact in Aries. Neptune is in Aries. I want you to consider that in the Aries part of the chart, Saturn wants you to get serious about the right goals for you. If you have Neptunian goals in the house occupied by Aries, spiritual, artistic, creative, inspired, charitable, healing, therapeutic, philanthropic, Saturn wants you to concretize them and get serious about them. If you are having trouble, if you are too rose-colored, too fantasist about opportunities, and you are saying yes to goals or saying yes to activities or saying yes to relationships that may promise more than they deliver, then Saturn wants you to rectify that. Saturn wants you to take your Neptunian goals seriously and to not find yourself saying yes to something that asks more of you, where you are giving more in return for what you're getting in a way that is self-sacrificing and sacrificing of your ambitions in the Aries part of your chart. So even though Saturn is in Pisces, the orb is tight enough that Saturn can reach out and put a steadying hand on Neptune or a rectifying hand on Neptune. The full moon occurs on Monday at around 9:56 a.m. Do I have that right? 9:55 a.m. Monday, May the 12th, Pacific time. It opposes Uranus. It trines the North Node. And now my cat is having a hairball moment. Seriously, you guys. It's like, whenever I do readings, the weirdest things occur. It's like I go through hours in my day and none of this happens. Poor guy. All right. On that note, as you head to the full moon in Scorpio on Monday, you know, I already have a sense of the direction of what needs to occur. Now, I don't want anyone to take this amiss, but I'm going to share it. And there are three ways to engage with me, right? There's the free content on this channel. There is the sign-specific content that I'm putting in the membership part of the chart. Membership's at $6.99 a month, and I'm putting out sign-specific content there. It's really meant for your rising sign, although you can look at it for your sun sign or your moon sign. So all the rising signs, I'm going to talk about this full moon in Scorpio in the way that it connects to your chart, the rising sign, from a rising sign perspective, which is the layout of your chart. So we'll explore this more there. Each of you gets to determine how much you want to engage with me and how much you want to spend or not. And then the third way is to get a personal reading with me and information on memberships and my email address is in the description box below. You can contact me at that email address and I can get you information about readings. I already have a sense. Sorry. I already have a sense. I'm sorry, you guys are just going to be like, what is wrong with you, Abby? He's just pressing. I know. It's not so much the inconvenience of the sirens. I mean, as quiet as it is, this is what it normally is like in Glendale. But I am kind of constantly amazed. Either it's my awareness of ambient sounds that is just so heightened when I'm doing this, or it's just, we're close enough to the full moon that you know what, it might be a reminder for me to just say this to you. As we head towards a full moon, your emotional and intuitive capacities are likely to be tapped out, right? The pot of milk comes to a boil. Everything becomes frenetic. There's a lot more to do. How will I get all this done? Should I do this? Should I do that? It's an incredibly productive time as we head towards the full moon, but things become unwieldy. There becomes too much on the to-do list. We become emotionally overwrought. And I can just tell that even with this reading and some of my reactions, I am just a little highly strung. And this is just something I need to tell everybody. It might be just that needs to be as you head towards the full moon, and it's 4:44 as I say this, as you head towards the full moon, just be aware that full moon, as you head to, things may just become increasingly heightened and stressful and intense, and our capacities are tapped out or whatever it is. I already have a sense of what the full moon in Scorpio is trying to tell me with regard to what needs to be changed or adjusted in the Scorpio part of my chart to help me move in the right direction from the Uranus part of the chart, and how that will help support the North Node in the Pisces part of the chart and what I need to release in the Virgo part of the chart. I don't know that I necessarily need to wait for the full moon 4 or 5 days from now to make that clear to me. The thing that I'm going to be watching for is, does something happen that intensifies me moving in the direction that I know I need to move in? It's one thing to consider change. It's one thing to acknowledge its necessity. And it's another thing to find yourself in a place where things are manifesting and occurring externally in such a way that brings matters to a head, so that change becomes a reality, or starts to, or moves towards becoming a reality. And that is what I would be on the lookout for. The week after the full moon, the sun's going to trine the south node, Jupiter's going to square the nodes, the sun is going to conjunct Uranus. Mercury's going to square Pluto. All those aspects that we talked about that I encoded into the full moon, a lot of them are going to become exact. 3 of the 5. The 4th one, Venus trine Mars, occurs on the 22nd of this month. And the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is not going to happen until February, March of next year. But Saturn and Neptune are going to be in conversation in Aries, back in Pisces, and then together in Aries between now and a year from now. That conjunction is on. All right, thank you guys so much for your patience. I need to go check on my senior cat and make sure that he is okay. He is. I'm sure he's fine. But he is getting up there, and I just need to make sure he's okay. And thank you for bearing with me during this full moon video. It was a kind of a full moon video. And I hope you found this intriguing. I was going to say useful. It would be useful, but I would be in a place of, there's so much about this full moon that is about us tapping into alignment and flow and the right choices and the right kind of change and the right kind of resolutions and outcomes and the right kind of the right direction. There's still emphasis on stabilizing the Pisces part of the chart till May the 20th. And as I said, I'll cover that in the weekly overview. Okay. I'm feeling the urge to go ahead and summarize this entire video again, but everything is in this. If you want to go ahead and bring up your own chart and think about the house occupied by Taurus and the Sun and Uranus and Mercury and Venus coming in at the end of the first week of June. If you want to think about the opposite house, the Scorpio part of the chart, and how that is in relationship with all the alignment work that you're doing in the Taurus part of your chart, that would be a great exercise. If you want to think about what it is that needs to be released as a result of the South Node eclipses in Virgo all the way to February 27, and what needs to be leaned into the Pisces part of the chart all the way to February 27, and how that contributes to this conversation, those would all be useful exercises. And you can just, I'm not saying this so that you go listen to this video again, but you can. And the content and the information is there. Thank you for your patience with me. If you found the content useful, feel free to share it with others, tell others about it, tell them to be patient with me as well during this video. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. When you click the subscribe button, there's a bell icon next to subscribe. When you subscribe, it'll give you the option to click the wiggly bell on top. Click on that, you'll be notified when I do new videos. You can contribute to this channel monetarily by using the thanks button underneath this video, or by donating. Information on that is in the description box. You can contribute to this channel for free by liking this video or leaving a comment. If you feel so inclined, thank you to everybody who's been commenting. I hope that the break of the last 2 or 3 days has given you some time to catch up on the last 3 videos that I did in succession. Now this is out there. I'm going to turn my attention to putting the sign-specific content out there over the weekend. I'm going to post next week's weekly overview, and we'll continue to move forward. All right, folks, more to follow. Take care.